The frog god tells two stories about the frog god. The first story is about the daughter of the frog god, Shiyi, and the handsome young man Xue Kunsheng. The second story is about the frog god supervising the fundraising for the construction of the Wusheng Temple and helping those who do good deeds. The frog god always discerns between good and evil, forcing those who are selfish and dishonest with money to give it back. It's truly heartwarming. First story. In the areas around the Yangtze River and Han River in southern China, people devoutly believe in the frog god. The frog god's shrine is filled with countless frogs, some as large as steaming baskets. If someone offends the god, strange signs appear at their home. Frogs hopping and crawling on tables, beds, even sticking to smooth walls without falling down. Various signs. Whenever these signs appear, it indicates impending misfortune for the household. People become fearful and quickly sacrifice livestock and pray at the shrine, hoping to appease the god. In Hubei, there was a young man named Xue Kunsheng. He was intelligent and handsome. When he was 6 or 7 years old, an old lady in green clothes came to his home, claiming to be a messenger of the frog god. She conveyed the god's will. His daughter was to be betrothed to Kunsheng. Xue Kunsheng's father was a simple and kind man, but he was not pleased with the proposal and declined, saying his son was still too young. However, even though he refused the frog god's proposal, he didn't immediately arrange any other marriage for his son. Years passed, and Kunsheng grew up. Xue's father arranged a marriage with the Zhang family. The frog god warned the Zhang family that Kunsheng was meant for his daughter, and they shouldn't intervene. The Zhang family, frightened, returned the dowry to the Xue family. Xue's father was worried and visited the shrine, praying and admitting that he didn't dare to become in-laws with a divine entity. After praying, he saw a layer of large maggots in the food and wine offerings, which made him pour them out and apologize before returning home. Feeling more fearful and helpless, he decided to let things unfold. One day, when Kunsheng was outside, he encountered a messenger who read out the god's decree, inviting him to the shrine. With no other choice, he followed the messenger. Inside a red-painted gate, he saw a magnificent building. An elderly man sat in the main hall, looking about 70 or 80 years old. Kunsheng prostrated himself before the old man, who helped him up and offered him a seat at the table. Soon, servants and women crowded the room. The old man told them, "Go inside and inform the young man Xue has arrived." A few of the women hurried away. Shortly after, an old lady led a young girl out. She was about 16 or 17, incredibly beautiful. The old man pointed at the girl and said to Kunsheng, "This is my daughter, Shiyi. I think you two would make a harmonious couple. Your father declined because she's not of the same kind. This is your life-changing decision. Your parents can only assist. It ultimately depends on your intentions." Kunsheng was captivated by Shiyi's beauty and speechless. The old lady said, "I knew you were willing. You can go back for now, and I will send Shiyi to you later." Kunsheng agreed and left, rushing back home to share the news with his parents. Xue's father couldn't think of any other solution, so he instructed his son to go and politely decline the proposal. Kunsheng was unwilling, and an argument ensued between him and his father. Just then, the wedding procession arrived at the door, accompanied by a group of women in green dresses, and Shiyi. As she entered the house, she bowed to Kunsheng's parents. Seeing Shiyi's exceptional beauty, Kunsheng's parents were charmed by her. That night, Kunsheng and Shiyi became husband and wife, their love flourishing. From then on, Shiyi's parents frequently visited Kunsheng's home. They would wear red clothes, predicting joyful events for the family. If they were white, it foretold wealth. This practice brought prosperity to the Xue family. However, after marrying the frog god's daughter, Kunsheng's home was filled with frogs everywhere: doorsteps, rooms, fences, and even the toilet. No one dared to scold or step on them. While Kunsheng treated frogs with care when he was in a good mood, he would trample on them when angry, showing no restraint. Though she was gentle and patient, she had a fiery temper and disapproved of Kunsheng's behavior. One day, during an argument, she scolded him. Kunsheng grew furious and yelled, "Are you relying on your parents' abilities to harm people? A real man shouldn't be afraid of frogs. Shiyi was particularly sensitive about the word frog, and hearing Kunsheng's words infuriated her. She retorted, "Since I entered your home, I made your land fertile and your business prosperous. Now everyone is well-fed and well-clothed. Is this the reward I get? You want to grow wings like an owl and eat your mother's eyes?" Kunsheng's anger escalated, and he scolded her further, saying, "I'm disgusted by the filthy things you brought here. I'm embarrassed to pass them on to future generations. It's better to end things now." He drove her out. Kunsheng's parents heard about the incident and reprimanded him, urging him to bring Shiyi back. Fuming, Kunsheng refused. That night, both Kunsheng and his mother suddenly fell ill, refusing to eat. Anxious, Xue's father rushed to the shrine to apologize. Thankfully, nothing tragic occurred this time, and Shiyi remained absent. A year later, Kunsheng deeply regretted his actions and missed Shiyi. He secretly went to the shrine, begging her to return, but there was still no response. Before long, he heard that the frog god had arranged for Shiyi to marry into the Yuan family. Kunsheng was disappointed and considered other marriage proposals, but none compared to Shiyi. His desire to see her grew stronger. He visited the Yuan family, found their house rebuilt, and waited for Shiyi's return. Kunsheng's regret grew, and he stopped eating and drinking, falling ill. His parents were deeply worried, not knowing what to do. In a state of unconsciousness, Kunsheng heard someone touching him, saying, "How can a man constantly break ties and act like this?" Opening his eyes, he was shocked to see Shiyi. Overjoyed, he stood up and asked, "How did you come here?" Shiyi explained, "Considering your past frivolousness, I should have followed my father's will and married someone else. I had already accepted the dowry from the Yuan family long ago, but I couldn't bear to leave you. The wedding was scheduled for tonight. My father couldn't back out of the agreement with the Yuan family, so I returned the dowry myself. He sent me away, saying, 'Stubborn girl. Ignoring my advice, you'll suffer at the hands of the Xue family in the future. Don't come back even if you die.'" Kunsheng was moved by her loyalty, and tears streamed down his face. Their reunion brought happiness to both families. From then on, Shiyi became more pleasant, and they lived without quarreling for 2 years. Shiyi had a strong aversion to snakes. Once, Kunsheng playfully put a small snake in a wooden box and tricked her into opening it. Shiyi turned pale with fear and scolded him. Kunsheng responded in anger, and their exchange of harsh words led to Shiyi leaving, declaring that they were done. Kunsheng's father was fearful, and he scolded Kunsheng for his actions. Fortunately, no disaster followed, and Shiyi didn't make any contact. After over a year, Kunsheng regretted his actions and missed Shiyi terribly. He secretly went to the shrine to beg for her return, still without a response. Not long after, he heard that the frog god had arranged for Shiyi to marry into the Yuan family. Kunsheng was crestfallen, and he attempted to propose to other families. However, none of them compared to Shiyi, and his longing for her intensified. He visited the Yuan family's house and found it renovated, waiting for Shiyi to come. Overwhelmed with regret, he stopped eating and drinking, falling ill. His parents were anxious and didn't know what to do. Kunsheng was in a delirium when he felt someone touching him and saying, "How can a man constantly break ties and then act like this?" Opening his eyes, he saw Shiyi. Kunsheng was overjoyed and stood up, asking how she came here. Shiyi explained that she had resolved to follow his treatment of her, which meant obeying her father's decision to marry into another family. She had already accepted the dowry from the Yuan family, but she couldn't bear to leave him. The wedding was scheduled for that night, but she returned the dowry herself and received her father's reprimand. Kunsheng was deeply moved by her loyalty, and tears flowed down his face. Their reunion brought joy to both families. From then on, Shiyi became even more amiable, and they lived without any further disputes. One day, Shiyi told Kunsheng that in the past, she had refrained from having children with him, because she feared they might not have a smooth life together. Now, she said she was ready, and soon after, she gave birth to twin sons. From then on, her parents would visit often, and whenever they came, they would wear red or white clothes. predicting good fortune or wealth for the family, respectively. Because of this practice, the Xue family prospered. However, with Kunsheng's family thriving, frogs filled their house. Kunsheng matured and ceased his mischievous behavior. His relationship with Shiyi deepened, and their bond grew stronger. Second story. Now, let's delve into the second story. There was a wealthy merchant surnamed Zhou known for his extreme stinginess. At that time, the local people were raising funds to build a temple in honor of Guan Yu, a revered figure. People from all walks of life, regardless of wealth or poverty, were willing to contribute both money and effort, except for Zhou, who was unwilling to part with a single coin. As time went on, the collected funds fell short, and the temple construction remained incomplete. The leaders of the effort were at a loss. During a frog deity worship ceremony, suddenly, the deity possessed a shaman and spoke, saying, "Zhou, the frontrunner for the construction of Guan Yu Temple, has been assigned by General Zhou Kang to oversee the fundraising. Bring me the account books." The account books were promptly handed over. The shaman continued, "For those who have already donated, no further pressure shall be applied. As for those who haven't donated yet, let them write down the amount they are willing and capable of donating." Everyone obediently complied, noting their intended contributions. Finally, the shaman looked around and asked, "Is Zhou present here?" Zhou, trying to hide in the crowd, was fearful that the frog deity would sense his presence. Upon hearing the question, he turned pale and reluctantly moved forward. The shaman pointed at the account book and said, "Write down a donation of 100 taels." Zhou refused. The shaman, growing angry, said, "You willingly paid 200 taels to settle an adulterous debt. So why hesitate for this good cause?" It turned out that Zhou had been caught in an affair with a married woman and was caught red-handed by her husband. As atonement, he had paid 200 taels in compensation. The frog deity deliberately revealed this shameful incident to Zhou. Embarrassed and frightened, Zhou had no choice but to mark down a donation of 100 taels. After returning home, Zhou shared the incident with his wife. She commented, "The shaman is extorting you." From that point on, the shaman repeatedly came demanding money, but Zhou consistently refused. One day, Zhou was resting during the day when he heard a sound outside resembling the heavy breathing of a cow. Upon looking up, he saw a gigantic frog. The frog was just the right size to fit through the door, and it laboriously wriggled its way into the house. It then turned around, resting its chin on the doorstep. Zhou's entire family was terrified. Zhou speculated, "This must be here for the fundraising money." He lit incense and prayed, expressing his intention to pay 30 taels immediately and the rest later. The frog remained motionless. Zhou increased the offer to 50 taels, causing the frog's body to shrink by about a foot. Adding another 20, the frog diminished to the size of a teacup. Zhou offered to pay the entire amount, causing the frog to shrink to the size of a fist, before slowly crawling out of the room and disappearing through a crack in the wall. Hastily, Zhou fetched 50 taels and delivered it to the place where the Guan Yu Temple was under construction. People were astonished to see that he had given more than he should have. Zhou did not explain the reasons behind his unusual behavior. A few days later, the shaman stated, "Zhou still owes 50 taels. Why hasn't he paid the full amount yet?" Frightened, Zhou reluctantly delivered 10 more taels, hoping to resolve the matter. One day, while Zhou and his wife were eating, the large frog returned. Just like before, it crawled into the house, its eyes wide open as if in anger. In no time, the huge frog climbed onto the bed, causing it to shake as if about to topple over. It rested its mouth on the pillow and fell asleep. Its bloated belly resembled a reclining bull, and it filled all 4 corners of the room. Zhou was very afraid and offered another 40 taels, making up a total of 100 taels. Yet, the frog on the bed remained still. Not long after, a group of smaller frogs started gathering. The next day, even more frogs appeared, filling the storeroom and the bed. Frogs larger than bulls jumped onto the stove, devouring flies. Dead flies fell into the cooking pot, contaminating the food beyond consumption. By the 3rd day, the courtyard was crammed with frogs, leaving no space unoccupied. Panicked and at a loss, Zhou sought advice from the shaman. The shaman said, "Undoubtedly, they find the sum of money insufficient." Zhou, hearing this, lit incense and prayed, pledging to pay an extra 20 taels beyond the 100. In response, the massive frog on the bed lifted its head. Adding more, Zhou promised to pay the entire 100, and the frog slowly moved its fur limbs before crawling out of the room and leaving. However, it crawled just a few steps before returning and lying down at the doorway. Anxious, Zhou asked the shaman for an explanation. The shaman deduced that the frog wanted the money right away. Zhou had no choice but to gather the sum and hand it over to the shaman. Only then did the giant frog leave. As it went further away, its body suddenly shrunk and merged into the group of smaller frogs. The crowd of frogs gradually dispersed, leaving only the two people who had not yet fulfilled their obligations. One of them fell ill for over a month, and the other developed a large sore. The cost of medical treatment far exceeded the amount they owed but hadn't paid. People believed this was a consequence of embezzling donations. Shiyi remarked, "The old frog, in managing fundraising, always assists those who do good deeds. Isn't this method much more benevolent than the government's use of torture and punishment?" By first exposing embezzlement and giving a chance for those involved to make amends and avoid disaster, this seemingly imposing practice is, in reality, an act of charity.
Alright, this story has come to an end. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you.